Hello, this is Torsten, and this is the process of me making my instrument. The very first thing I did is I made the blueprints of my instrument on ArtieWorks. I cut the blueprint onto a 3 mm thick wooden plate with the laser cutter. I glued most of my instrument with wood glue, but I used the glue gun for pieces that wasn't gonna hold much tension. The first thing I did in the construction process, I glued 4 walls parallel to each other onto the plate that is going to be the bottom of my instrument. 2 long walls on the outer part of my instrument, and 2 short walls in the inner part of my instrument. The walls are what's going to keep the keys separated from each other and keep the keys from moving side to side. The inner walls are shorter than the outer walls because I want the inside of my instrument to be spacious so it works as a resonator. On each of the walls there is a 3 mm diameter hole. The placement of the walls and holes were measured carefully so a stick like a straw could go through all of the holes. The straw is important because I put the middle of the key on top of the straw so they work like a seesaw. Of course, the keys would just fall out of the instrument without something grabbing the straw. So what I did was glue a Lego piece with a hole onto the middle of each key so that I could push the straw through the Lego and keep the key in place while it still works as a seesaw. I also glued small walls onto the back of the instrument and a smaller wall over the keys so the keys wouldn't be too high. The next thing I did was create the top of the instrument that the strings, bridges, and things called jacks would be. The top plate is the same size as the bottom plate, but has small rectangular holes. I glued 2 bridges into 2 of the biggest holes. Then before I glued the top plate onto the rest of the instrument, I worked on the jacks and where the jacks go through. The jacks are what actually frets the strings. There is a jack for each string, meaning there are 3 jacks. The jacks are small plates that move up and down for the top plate and is located over the tip of the keys inside the instrument. A jack is pushed up when a key is pressed because of the seesaw mechanism. To prevent the jacks from moving around inside the instrument, I put another 3 layers of 3 mm wood that the jacks could go through. Another thing I needed to prevent was the jacks from being pushed or pulled all the way out of the instrument. So I glued small wooden edges that would go onto the very bottom of the jack so there is no way for the jack to be pushed or pulled out of the hole. I finally put the jacks through the hole. Then I cut 1/3 through the side of the jack that's at the very bottom of what is sticking out of the top plate. This is so I could connect small popsicle stick pieces to the jacks. The popsicle sticks would be what grabs the strings next to the jack. Before I did the strings, I made 3 small cuts on each bridge that would keep the strings in place even when plugged. I also got a Lego stick with 9 holes and drilled 2 screws through 2 of the holes, attaching it to the outer wall. This would later be used for the tuning. Then I cut 3 strings and tied one end of each string to really small Legos. I drilled a hole for each string on the top plate where the strings would come out of. The holes were big enough for the strings to get through, and small enough so that the Legos wouldn't get through. Then I tied each of the other ends to long Lego pins. The Lego pins then is connected with the Lego stick with 9 holes. First I only had one stick with 9 holes, but it didn't give enough friction to the pins, so when I tuned the pins couldn't hold the tension. So I connected another 9 hole stick to the first stick with small pins. That's the end of me and the process of making my instrument. It may be tricky, but the strings can still be replaced. And in case anything ever happens to the straw, you can just get a new straw and replace the old straw with a new one.